In 1462, the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, the man who had conquered Constantinople and never retreated from anything, marched 90,000 soldiers into Wallachia to destroy one prince. When he reached the Wallachian capital, he found 20,000 of his own men impaled on stakes across 6 kilometers of forest. He turned his army around and went home. The prince who built that forest was 34 years old. His name was Vlad, and what he did before that and after it was worse. Vlad III, Prince of Wallachia. To understand what Vlad became, you need to understand what was done to him first. Wallachia, in the 1430s, was one of the most dangerous pieces of real estate in the medieval world, a small principality squeezed between the expanding Ottoman Empire to the south and the Kingdom of Hungary to the north. Every Wallachian prince who wanted to keep his throne had to perform a near impossible balancing act, paying tribute to the Ottomans while maintaining enough credibility with Hungary to resist being absorbed entirely. Vlad's father, Vlad II Dracula, managed this act for years. Then in 1442, the Ottomans demanded something he couldn't refuse. They wanted his sons. Vlad was approximately 11 years old when his father handed him and his younger brother Radu to the Ottoman Sultan as political hostages. The message was simple: behave, pay your tribute, and your sons live. Cause problems, and they don't. Vlad spent the next 6 years as a captive in a foreign court, surrounded by people who spoke a different language, practiced a different religion, and held his life as collateral for his father's political loyalty. His younger brother Radu adapted. He learned Ottoman culture, converted to Islam, and became a favorite of the future Sultan Mehmed II. Vlad did not adapt. He watched. He learned how power actually worked when nobody was pretending to be civilized. And then in 1447, while Vlad was still a hostage, his father was assassinated by Wallachian boyar nobles. His older brother Mircea was captured and buried alive. Vlad was 16 years old, his family was dead, and the men who had killed them were running his country. The Ottoman court released him 2 years later. They thought he would be useful. They had no idea what they had created. When Vlad finally seized the Wallachian throne in 1456, most new rulers begin with diplomatic gestures, alliances, proclamations, shows of strength. Vlad began with a dinner party, and what he did to his dinner guests established a pattern he would follow for the rest of his life. A pattern so systematic, so deliberately calculated, and so extreme that contemporary witnesses struggled to find language to describe it. Here is what happened at that dinner. Shortly after taking power, Vlad invited the boyar nobles of Wallachia, the landowning class who had historically made and unmade Wallachian princes, including his own father and brother, to an Easter feast at his court in Târgoviște. The boyars arrived. They ate. Then Vlad asked them a question. He asked how many princes they had seen in their lifetimes. The answers came back. 10, 20, 30 years of watching Wallachian princes come and go, many of them removed by the very men sitting at this table. Vlad listened to every answer. Then he had them arrested. The older boyars, those who had lived long enough to be complicit in his father's murder, were impaled on the spot. The younger ones, those healthy enough to work, were marched to the ruins of Poenari Castle in the Carpathian Mountains. There they were forced to labor, in their Easter clothes, then in whatever remained of their Easter clothes, then in nothing at all, until the fortress was rebuilt. Many died in the construction. Those who survived built the stronghold Vlad would use as his primary base for the rest of his reign. In a single evening, Vlad had eliminated his primary domestic political threat, rebuilt his most important fortress using his enemies as the workforce, and sent an unmistakable message to every remaining power broker in Wallachia. This was not a ruler who would be removed by his own nobles. This was a ruler who would remove them first, and he was just getting started. Impalement was Vlad's signature, but understanding what that actually means requires understanding how it was done. Contemporary sources are specific. The stakes were not designed to kill quickly. They were carefully calibrated, thick enough to support the body, blunt enough to penetrate without immediately piercing vital organs. The goal was not death. The goal was duration. Victims could survive on the stake for hours. Some survived for days. The stakes were positioned at different heights, depending on the victim's social rank. A detail documented in multiple independent contemporary sources that reveals the bureaucratic precision of the operation. This was not rage. This was policy, administered with the organizational efficiency of a government program. The scale of that policy is documented in the historical record. In 1459, Vlad had the merchants of the Saxon city of Brasov, who had been trading with his political rivals, impaled outside the city walls. The Nuremberg woodcut you're looking at right now is believed to depict this specific event. Vlad dining at a table surrounded by a forest of the impaled, his meal apparently unaffected by what surrounded it. Contemporary German pamphlets describe the scene in detail. Those pamphlets circulated across Europe. They were among the first mass-printed news reports in history. Vlad the Impaler was one of the first people to achieve what we would now call viral notoriety, spread through the brand new technology of the printing press. The Saxon merchant massacres were one category among many. Vlad applied his methods to Ottoman envoys who refused to remove their turbans in his presence. He had the turbans nailed to their heads. To unfaithful wives, whose methods of execution were documented in the German pamphlets in details we won't fully repeat here. To lazy or dishonest merchants, impaled alongside the goods they had misrepresented. To beggars and the sick, who he reportedly invited to a feast, locked in the hall, and burned alive, on the stated grounds that they were a burden on his kingdom. To captured Ottoman soldiers, in quantities that range from thousands to tens of thousands in individual documented incidents. The total numbers historians have verified are staggering. Estimates of the total killed under Vlad's direct orders range from 40,000 to 100,000 people, in a principality with a total population of approximately 500,000. The lower bound represents 8% of the entire Wallachian population. The upper bound represents 1 in 5. Killed by their own prince, in approximately 6 years of active rule. Contemporary sources include not just the German pamphlets, which some historians have argued were politically motivated exaggerations, but Ottoman chronicles, the accounts of Pope Pius II's personal envoy, and Vlad's own letter to the Hungarian king Matthias Corvinus, in which he personally itemized the casualties of his 1462 winter campaign against Ottoman territory. 23,184 people, listed by location, as a report to his ally. He kept records. He was proud of the numbers. That letter is in the archive. It has always been in the archive. 40,000 to 100,000 dead. A letter in which he counted the bodies himself. The forest of 20,000 impaled that turned back the Ottoman army. By any measure, Vlad the Impaler was one of the most prolific killers in medieval history. But here is where the story takes a turn that almost no one covers, and it is the most disturbing turn of all. Because in Romania today, Vlad is not remembered as a monster. He is remembered as a hero. His face has appeared on Romanian currency. Streets bear his name. And the historical argument for why, made not by extremists but by mainstream Romanian historians, is an argument that has no comfortable answer. We'll get to that. But first, the event that defines his entire reign, the night he built the Forest of the Dead. By 1462, Vlad had been raiding Ottoman territory for months, burning villages, killing soldiers, and writing to European monarchs to present himself as the frontline defender of Christian Europe against Ottoman expansion. Mehmed II had had enough. He assembled an army of approximately 90,000 men, the same army that had taken Constantinople 9 years earlier, and marched into Wallachia personally. Vlad had approximately 30,000 soldiers. He did not attempt a conventional defense. He burned his own crops, poisoned his own wells, drove his own civilian population into the forests, and launched a series of night raids against the Ottoman camp that reportedly killed thousands of soldiers and came within meters of killing Mehmed Sat himself. These were not the tactics of a man who was losing. They were the tactics of a man who understood exactly what kind of war he was fighting and was willing to do things his enemy would not. When Mehmed's army finally reached Targovishte, they found the city abandoned. And outside it, stretching across 6 kilometers of open ground, they found what Vlad had left for them. 20,000 Ottoman and Bulgarian prisoners, impaled, an entire forest of the dead, constructed specifically to be found, specifically to be seen, specifically to communicate one message to the most powerful military commander in the world, that the prince of this small country was not afraid of him and was capable of things that Mehmed's army, for all its size, was not prepared to face. Ottoman chroniclers recorded what happened next. Mehmed II, conqueror of Constantinople, sultan of the most powerful empire in the world, looked at the forest of the dead, declared that he could not take a country from a man capable of this, and turned his army around. He went home. The 90,000 soldiers went home. Wallachia remained independent, and Vlad the Impaler, who had just used 20,000 human bodies as a military installation, had won. Here is the question the history forces you to ask. A man who killed between 8 and 20% of his own population, who impaled nobles, merchants, foreign envoys, beggars, and soldiers with equal methodical efficiency, is today considered a national hero in Romania, not by fringe nationalists, by mainstream historical consensus. His image has appeared on Romanian currency. His name is on streets and institutions. Annual commemorations mark his reign, and the historical argument for why is not as simple as it sounds. Romanian historians point to 3 things. First, Vlad maintained Wallachian independence against the Ottoman Empire at a moment when Bulgaria had fallen, Serbia had fallen, and Constantinople itself had fallen. He did what none of his predecessors or successors managed to do consistently. He held the line. Second, Vlad applied his methods equally across social classes in a way that was genuinely radical for medieval governance. Nobles, corrupt officials, and foreign merchants faced the same punishment as common criminals. The Golden Cup legend, a golden cup placed at a public fountain that was never stolen throughout his entire reign because everyone knew the punishment, reflects a documented contemporary understanding that Vlad's terror had produced a specific kind of order. Third, the men Mehmed II sent to replace him after his eventual capture were far more accommodating to Ottoman interests. Wallachia, under Vlad's successors, paid tribute and lost autonomy. Under Vlad, it did not. None of that erases the 40,000 to 100,000 dead. Romanian historians do not claim it does. What they argue is that the question of whether those deaths were a war crime or a survival strategy, or both simultaneously, depends entirely on how you weigh the survival of a nation against the cost of its survival. That is not a question with a comfortable answer. It is not a question history's dark archives will answer for you. But it is a question worth sitting with. Because it did not end in 15th century Wallachia. Vlad the Impaler died in 1476 or 1477, killed in battle or assassinated. The sources disagree. His head was sent to Constantinople. Mehmed II displayed it to prove the forest builder was dead. His body was reportedly buried at Snagov Monastery. But when archaeologists excavated the site in the 1930s, they found animal bones. No human remains. Where Vlad the Impaler is actually buried, nobody knows. And then, 4 centuries later, an Irish author named Bram Stoker published a novel. And the man who stopped the Ottoman Empire became something else entirely. What Stoker actually knew about Vlad and what he invented is the final dark irony of this story. And it changes how you see everything that came before it. In 1897, Bram Stoker published Dracula. The novel became one of the most influential works of fiction in Western culture, spawning a mythology that has generated billions of dollars across publishing, film, television, and tourism for over a century. And the connection between Stoker's vampire and Vlad the Impaler is real, but it is far thinner than most people believe. Stoker's research notes, held at the Rosenbach Museum in Philadelphia, show that he encountered the name Dracula in a book by the British consul to Transylvania, published in 1820. The book noted that Dracula meant devil in the Wallachian language, and mentioned a Wallachian prince by that name. That is what Stoker took, a name and a geography. The vampire mythology was drawn from Eastern European folklore, not from Vlad's biography. There is no evidence in Stoker's notes that he knew about the impalements, the forest of the dead, the Easter dinner, or the letter in which Vlad counted his own victims by location. The result is one of history's darkest ironies. Vlad the Impaler, who killed between 40,000 and 100,000 people, who built a forest of 20,000 impaled bodies as a military installation, who made the conqueror of Constantinople turn around and go home, is remembered globally as a fictional vampire who sleeps in a coffin and avoids sunlight. Bran Castle, which has only a marginal historical connection to Vlad, receives hundreds of thousands of tourists every year. Poenary Castle, the actual fortress built from the labor of the men whose families Vlad had just executed, is a ruin in the mountains that most people have never heard of. The real story has been buried under the fictional one. The documented horror has been replaced by a marketable one. And the questions that the real Vlad raises, about power, about survival, about what rulers do to their own people in the name of protecting them, those questions have been safely filed away under fiction where they don't have to be answered. Vlad the Impaler ruled Wallachia across 3 separate reigns for a total of approximately 6 years. In that time, he killed between 40,000 and 100,000 people, up to 1 in 5 of his own subjects. He maintained Wallachian independence against the most powerful military force in the medieval world. He was imprisoned by his own ally for 12 years, returned to power, and died in circumstances that his contemporaries couldn't agree on. His body has never been found. His head was displayed in Constantinople as proof he was dead. 4 centuries later, a novelist who barely knew his name turned him into the most famous fictional monster in Western culture. And in the country where he ruled, where the people he killed are from, he is considered a hero. The documented record of what he actually did is more disturbing than the legend. It is also more complicated than the legend, and it raises questions that the legend was specifically designed to make it unnecessary to answer. That is why history's dark archives exists. Because the real story is always darker than the comfortable version, and the comfortable version is always hiding something. Vlad III, Prince of Wallachia, born approximately 1428, died 1476 or 1477. Buried, nobody knows where. He killed up to 1 in 5 of his own people. He stopped the Ottoman Empire with a forest of the dead. He counted his victims by name and sent the list to his allies as a progress report. Bram Stoker turned him into a vampire. The archive shows what he actually was. History's dark archives. Subscribe. The legend is never the whole story.